have any type of response to anything that was said in the interview with the president? Is there anything that he said that
Yeah,
is not true?
I watched the interview with the president, and I thought it was amusing. Number one, I'd like to start with his claim of election fraud or election stealing and whatnot. I think it's disingenuous to the entire population to say that I never won a ballot and whatnot, especially considering we went all the way to the courts. And while the courts couldn't find specific wrongdoing, they also couldn't rule it out. And as a result, I became vice chancellor at the time. My superior stepped down, Chancellor von Göttingen, and as a result, I became chancellor. It's very simple. I know the president said there's no precedent for that, but that's not true at all. If you have a vice president or a vice chancellor, it's empirical that as soon as that person steps down, or if they're incapable, the person below them would take that position. When I was shot and almost killed, my vice president became acting president until I came back. So that's the first thing I want to dispel, because I think what you're going to notice with a lot of these government people whenever they try to argue with people who are more intelligent than them is it ends up being this free-for-all where it's this group of these people in the federal government. You have this finance minister, the Spartacist. You have the president and the vice president who stole the position of prime minister at this point. And essentially, it's 3-on-1, but you have these three people who are pretty much mentally deficient against one person of extraordinary intellect. And it's really not a fight.
Okay. My next question was going to be about the finance minister, Richard Thane. I've seen some documents being put out today. Is there anything you'd like to say about anything going on with that situation, or is that too fresh?
I will echo what the emperor said, that people who are in the federal government who take this position of anti-crown sentiment, trying to audit the emperor's personal finances, his personal accounts, and then trying to undermine members of the White Rose Coalition, the emperor's party, is extremely, extremely offensive, not only to the dignity of the office that that person holds, but also to the entire empire. 20 years ago, we fought a massive, massive war, essentially, to create the strength and the foundations that we live in now. And now we have people who essentially weren't there for that, have forgotten about it, or don't care.
Okay. The next question, and I'm just going to kind of go back over some of the topics that we discussed with the president first. The next question is anything regarding the royal treasury and gold and anything with the economics of the city of Berlin currently that you'd like to speak about.
There was an amount of gold that was taken during a conflict on the Western Front. And while that was occurring, the government decided that they actually wanted all the gold. But they haven't stated any reason why they deserve it instead of the emperor himself, especially when you consider that the emperor has made the military personally subordinate to him, along with people like the Kaiser Guard and the Sovereign Bureau and things like that. So the military and the Kaiser Guard are on the same playing field, essentially, when it comes to subordination to the emperor. That was a decree released in September. I believe it was September 19th, where the emperor took full responsibility personally for the military. So at this point, we've actually heard no justification from anybody in the federal government as to why they deserve that gold or that money more than the emperor's account does. And until they do that, they're not just going to be able to write a document and get a bunch of people to sign it and say, we're going to take this back. That's not how that process works.
I understand. That's valid. Okay, so my next question is regarding like the whole party tier system. People selling party tiers, and then within 1 month, me personally, I've bought party tiers twice within 1 month. So the selling of party tiers and then being stripped away right away. And then also, I'm a part of the Ministry of Truth. We have like an AMT2 that is designed to have like a questionnaire to question people's political alliance with like the White Rose Coalition and all that. That has been removed right at the time where the White Rose Coalition is starting to, like the party's coming back, from what I understand. Is there anything you'd like to say about any of that?
Yeah, so the White Rose Coalition of course, was merged essentially into the federal government itself, where the president was the chairman of the White Rose. I was the one who spearheaded that because the party was so ineffective. But what we saw with this new administration that came in is just the amount of contempt that they had for anybody who was actually a party member and who was loyal to the crown. And so those abilities were taken away from the federal government because the emperor's not going to let his party be run by people who don't want to be in it. And with that came the removal of party tier selling by other people and the removal of some of the authorities that certain government agencies had to regulate kind of how the party functioned with these loyalty tests, with tiers, things like that. Party tiers are now sold by the Royal Treasury. And unfortunately, there was a lot of abuse with kind of that system. So there was a wipe, essentially, of every single person's party tiers earlier, I believe 2 weeks ago. At this point, we're trying to now get everyone their tiers back. And those people who buy the tiers from us are afforded a lot of privileges that other people aren't. And that kind of turned into a problem with the finance ministry, where they're trying to now regulate what party members can do, what lotteries they can participate in, and things like that. But until the government can show that they're no longer trying to undermine the foundational principles of that party, they're not going to be able to run it or direct its functions.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. I think the abuse of the sales of the party tiers has kind of turned a lot of people off of the whole idea of giving more and more money. Like I said, some people have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to where that's now like something that people are like, well, should I buy this? What's the benefit of it? I guess we'll just have to wait.
Well, I agree that it's unfortunate that every single person has been negatively affected by the actions of a few people in the government. When they would massively abuse how tiers were given out, they would try to sell them and then pocket the money for themselves. We had instances where people were selling hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of tiers, but they weren't recorded anywhere on any official registry. So we had no idea who had which tier, how many of which tier existed, because we had all these individuals who the president gave the ability to sell these tiers to, who were just doing it on their own volition and then pocketing the money. That's major corruption. That's part of the reason why they're no longer allowed to do that. And it's why all those tiers were taken away.
Okay. That's understandable as well. My next question is, are there any changes, anything coming on the horizon that you can speak about? Any large changes, anything that you've got in the works personally?
Well, my function, of course, is to facilitate the emperor's sort of communications to everybody and make sure things are running smoothly while he's away. And so our biggest priority always in the Sovereign Bureau is to make sure that essentially the war is won. That's our number one priority always, is reasserting our emperor's rightful claim as Holy Roman Emperor. So we're trying to push back the Italians, which we're being very successful at, by the way, push back the French, push back all these people who are trying to attack us. We're being attacked on every single side. And while we're trying to win the war externally, we have people in the government trying to undermine us internally.
Yeah, that does seem like a constant problem. Yeah. Okay.
And I would like to talk just one time about sort of where this goes back to the gold issue, is there was $7 million worth of this gold that was liquidated and put into the fund. That money doesn't just get held somewhere. We've given maybe almost $10 million out to war planning to make sure that things are being done. The Order Marshal, responsible for making sure all the war plans are sent through, has given millions of dollars to the Ministry of War to make sure that they're getting their war plans through. Everything that we're doing for the benefit of the war effort, for the benefit of this entire empire, instead of trying to just be greedy and say, no, we don't want this money in this account, we want it in our accounts. Instead of just waiting, we took action, and now we're dispersing that money to the people who need it most. That's the responsibility of the emperor to his people, and that's what he's doing.
My next question has to do with the freedom of speech was taken away recently. Is that something we could see possibly coming back in the future, or can you speak about why, or do you have any thoughts about that?
When I became chancellor and then president, I initiated or continued essentially my predecessor's executive order to limit a lot of the freedoms that were given in the Constitution, the Prussian Constitution to be specific, with the exception of freedom of speech, unless it was undermining the emperor himself. With this new administration, we've seen that they're actually restricting freedom even more, personal property even more, assembly. All these things that are basic rights that our people deserve have been taken away simply because the president in this new executive office want to get their policies through faster and think it's easier if there's less resistance. Do I think that freedom of speech will come back? Not in this term, I don't think. I think we'll have to wait either for a new government to come in, or we'll have to wait until the courts make a decision on the legality of that executive order, which they haven't done yet.
My friend here is asking if the title of the chancellor is returning.
Title of what?
He's asking if the title of the chancellor is returning.
You have to do that one more time. You keep cutting it on the last word.
Sorry. He's asking if the title of the chancellor is returning. Sorry.
No, it's that last word. Every time you try to say the last word, it cuts off immediately.
Is the title of the chancellor returning?
Oh, chancellor is a title returning? I'd say that the Crown mandate is a living document. It's changed all the time. It's edited. Things are moved around. And I would say that between president, chancellor, any of those titles, any of that stuff is subject to change, like anything in there. So, while I can't say definitely it's changing now, or it's going to change, or it's not going to change, I would say that the Crown mandate is an ever-evolving document, and things might be changed based on what happens. That's essentially how it works.
Okay. My next question is, I've seen things about the government not doing their, like people not doing their jobs, ministers not doing their jobs, things of that nature. Is there any other way other than going to federal council meetings and like speaking about like the failure to administrate and things like that? Is there anything that can be done to get these people that aren't doing things out of the office and people in that want to work and want to get things done?
Well, there's a lot of mechanisms. Number one, you can go to the federal council and you can impeach ministers. You can fire them outright if you're the prime minister or the president, and if you have an agreement with the prime minister. You can go to court and get them sent to jail. But one of the better ways to do all that, to make sure all of those things happen, is to make sure that you vote for the right person when the elections come around in about 30 days. That this administration's term is over soon, and when someone else is running to take the reins, at that point people need to make the choice. Essentially, it's a referendum on whether or not they like this administration right now, if they think this administration is serving them the best that they could. And I think if you look at the facts, if you look at the fact that we have 2 Supreme Court justices, we're missing, I think it's 5 or 7, I believe. I think it's 9 people in the Supreme Court. We're missing 7 then. If it's 7, then we're missing 5. Either way, we have a justice minister who hasn't recommended names, a president who hasn't appointed anybody, and this is we're past day 30 now. I think day 30 was last week. So we're more than halfway through this term, and almost nobody's been appointed to anything. We have a military district leader. Nobody's appointed to it. We have a district leader who's kind of fallen off the face of the earth now after making a few things to attack people. But we have all these people in government who aren't doing very much and are essentially drawing from resources or wasting time fighting with people who they're never going to win against.
Yeah.
And that's when essentially the elections become important. Whether or not you want that executive to stay there making those decisions.
My next question was a question I asked the president. Is there anything you can say about the previous prime minister who just passed away? I wasn't able to find out how he passed away, anything about it. Sterling Mueller is who I'm speaking of.
Sterling Mueller, the prime minister?
Correct. I'm sorry, yeah.
We have a number of reports from various agencies looking into essentially how he was killed. But we do know on a cursory glance that he was murdered. He was assassinated, essentially. We're not sure by who at this point. That's the responsibility of the NSB to go investigate political crimes like that, the assassination of a prime minister. So we're essentially waiting on that part of the government again to give us a conclusion. Whether or not they find somebody responsible for that and they bring them to the courts, or we do something like that. But at this point, we're relying on the federal government, His Majesty's government, to take a stand and to start doing things on their own.
Also, another question, this is off topic as well, but how do you feel about the CAG president, Chen Wei? Something was said by the president about how he was appointed and how it wasn't valid how he was appointed. And do you have anything to say about that?
I think Minister Wei he's had his ups and downs, most notably with this very large document that the Minister of Science released, where he put his name to the fact that he wanted the Order Marshal and the Royal Treasurer investigated and all the money returned with no reason for it. Everybody who signed their name to that document, including Chen Wei, I think were misled. I would like to give them the benefit of the doubt that they did it because someone told them to or pressured them to. But until they all rescind their signatures from that, we can't really clear any of them of wrongdoing. We know that from looking at it on its face, it's just an attack on the sovereign. We know that those people don't really believe a lot of those things because we've talked to them. But for some reason, there's some pressure force being applied to them to keep their names on that. And I think if we look into that, you'll see where the real corruption is.
Yeah, that makes sense. My next question is there anything in the future that you'd like to see happen? Is there anything that any change you'd like to see take place?
Anything in the future that what?
Is there anything in the future that you'd like to see happen? Any change that you'd like to see take place to better Berlin?
Yeah, I would like to see all the members of the Imperial command staff, everyone who leads a massive driving force, the Minister of War, the Minister of the Interior, the President, the Vice President, the Prime Minister, any of these people, all of them together or separately or whatnot, I would like to see them act a little bit more aggressively. We haven't really seen much aggression from anybody except for the government people, and while it's very interesting sometimes, it becomes boring for a vast majority of people when the only thing they can wake up to is seeing 5 more documents have been released and then nothing comes of it. We need continuity when we have conflict. We need to have a resolution. We need to have a court system that works. We need to have things like that, a federal council that makes actual decisions. All of those kind of things tie in together. And until we can have assurances that those things work, I think we have an ineffective administration in the government.
What do you think is the correct way to achieve that goal? Do you think maybe like tightening up on promotions, like limiting promotions and things, getting people actually have to work to get put into a higher place, or what do you think is the correct way to go about getting those results?
Well, we've done that. We've limited promotions beyond major to people who act responsibly or act in a way that befits that rank. We've restricted that. But the problem is, instead of having people work for those and force them into them, all we've really heard is complaining that not enough people are at a certain rank. We haven't seen a push from their superiors to make them do more to deserve it. Instead, what we've seen is them kind of stagnate and just go, well, if I can't get my people promoted, I'm not going to do anything. They create kind of a cyclic issue where nobody does anything because they don't get a reward. But if they did things, they would get rewards. That's essentially how the system works. It's a spoil system in a way. But you have to do things to gain things, and people don't understand that. And until they do, we're going to really have a problem.
Yeah, I agree. It seems to be like an ongoing theme. So it's just motivating the people, motivating everybody to get working. Everybody working towards a common goal, Is there anything else you'd like to say, sir?
I would just like to say that I think we have the potential to do a lot of good things with the people we have. I think once we learn to train the people to do well, once we kind of put our best foot forward and make people do things, establish a foundation for things to happen, then people will be a lot more interested. I think we've seen for the past 30 or so days, maybe even a little bit more, maybe even towards the end of my term, that a lot of people have just become much less interesting. There's less people running around and doing things. There's less people fighting with each other. Right now, the only major fight is between the Treasury and the Ministry of Finance. And that's not great for many people. No enlisted men in the military or the VSK or the NSP cares that much about the fact that the two people who run the two biggest economic institutes in the country are fighting. It doesn't do anything for them. So we really need a big push from the command to make things interesting for the people.
Yeah, I agree.